Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a Triad production. I'm your host, Dr. Graham Taylor. Today, I'm joined by Brandy Samuell. Brandy is an educator with 32 years of experience in various roles, including teacher, assistant superintendent, and mental health support leader. Currently, as the Director of Mental Health and Related Services at eLuma, she focuses on helping schools with mental health solutions and crisis management. Brandy holds degrees in business administration and school counseling, along with postmaster's work in educational diagnostics and leadership. She is certified in critical incident stress management and is dedicated to supporting students' emotional and behavioral needs. We're so excited to welcome Brandy today to our show to explore the challenges of integrating mental health support in schools, the importance of self-care for educators, and the growing shift in how mental health is approached within the educational system. Brandy, welcome to our show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward.
I am as well. So roughly 1993, that's when you entered into your now 32 years plus of education. And I'm sure in that period of time, you've seen a thing or two. Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. And Graham, it was actually, although I don't want to admit this, it was really about 1991. And I know that's hard to believe since I'm only 25, but
That's what I thought.
At any rate, I've been super fortunate in my career. I started out as a general education teacher. Interestingly, my undergrad degrees is in marketing, and I worked for a very large upscale retailer. I was a merchandise coordinator, and I was a little rogue when I was young, and I decided, hey, I don't think this is the real world, and I got into education happenstance. I decided to substitute teach, and then the rest is history, right? But I was lucky to start out as a general educator in a very underserved community in an extremely fast-growing school district in Texas. I was in Keller, Texas for almost 14 years. We were the third largest growing district in the school, so I got to see a tremendous amount of change. And Keller's very divided by very typical middle class to upper middle class, or high levels of poverty and high levels of transient students. So I was in the corner of the district, if you will, that had a high degree of transient students. And at one time in the school that I worked in, all of those almost 14 years, we served every ethnicity and culture recognized by the Texas Education Agency. So at the time, I just thought it was very cool, and I got to learn about a lot of different cultures from kids, which I loved. But now as I look back, it taught me a lot more than I realized at the time. So at any rate, I taught math, and primarily every now and then I would teach science. Every now and then I would teach language arts. And I would always volunteer to go be in a portable building because you could control your own climate. So at any rate, I was extremely fortunate to learn from some great educational leaders. As my career turned, I morphed into a school counselor. I stayed in that same school, if you will. We had a lot of high needs around behaviors, and actually had two self-contained special education classrooms that focused on behavior and emotional disorders. And I learned a lot there, and really primarily began primarily serving those students.
Wow, that's quite a history you got going here.
Yeah, it keeps going. I'll be very brief. I ended up in New Mexico as a behavior interventionist. That's how I morphed into a special educator, which I loved. And I was in Alamogordo Public Schools 10 years. Alamogordo is a really fascinating community, also very underserved. But we have a uniqueness in Alamogordo. We have an Air Force base there, Holloman Air Force Base, and we also had a German Air Force base. So again, I was exposed to some pretty unique cultures. While I was in Alamogordo, I worked as a behavior interventionist. In that time, I went back to school. I'm a perennial student, became an educational diagnostician, really moved into the special ed department at that time. And not only was I assessing students for learning disabilities or learning disorders, I also became a coordinator of specialized classrooms, primarily those classrooms that dealt with students with significant emotional disturbance. And then I morphed into a coordinator of the classrooms with students with significant cognitive impairments. And those students in those categories, I don't like to categorize kids, but they face such unique challenges, and they're my love. And I really got to work with families. And then I became the special ed director in Alamogordo, all throughout this time, I maintained my background in crisis counseling because I have a love for it. So even though I was in that special ed world, I always tiptoed in the mental health world.
Okay.
Um, Left Alamogordo, went to Roswell, New Mexico, and was an assistant superintendent there over all the student services. So that encompassed special ed, school counselors, social workers, crisis interventions, and was a crisis leader. And really, the trajectory of my career was changed in Roswell. I led the response to a school shooting, my seventh day at work,
Mm.
um,
Oh my.
and we didn't have a crisis plan in place, but we were working on one. I knew that was in my purvey, and I knew one of the first things we needed to do. So I really developed a lot of deep relationships in Roswell with staff and families that I treasure, and I can't tell you what I learned there. Left, as I told you, I was a nomad. Left New Mexico, went to Colorado, went to work for Denver Public Schools. Denver Public Schools, I just had this dream of working in an urban school. I'd been in a suburban area, Keller. I'd been in rural, high poverty in New Mexico. Even though Roswell isn't rural, there really aren't many resources. And then I just had to be in an urban area. I just had this fascination, and was exposed to so much there. I really got to learn about charters and support charter schools there, as well as the related services side for both students in special education and those on Section 504 plans, and then realized that urban setting probably wasn't the best for me. And I
Mhm.
didn't get that contact with families, which from my personal perspective, I believe is so important in schools. I believe we have to
Mm.
have that connection, a wraparound, if you will, and left and went to the virtual world, but prior to COVID. And I'm so glad I knew what the virtual world was.
Yes.
And I supported special education and mental and behavioral health through the time that I was supporting schools in the virtual world. And then that brings me to eLuma, and I always say eLuma is the culmination of all the things, right? I get to do all
It's yeah.
and not only drive and lead product, but I really love working with staff. I really love to coach staff because that's where I think we can just see so much impact on students. And I said, I love working with students and families. I do. I still love it. And I can just get caught up in all these stories about my families. But I really love giving educators the skills. I think that's where we come into capacity. We can all, as humans, learn a lot of things, but we have to have that capacity and the knowledge. And so I love being able to share what we do at eLuma, but also being able to consult and support. So that's me, Graham, probably more than you ever wanted to know, but
No, I love that. Wow, I'm gonna have to take a breath because that's just so many. What a career today. I mean, I know you're still going because you're only 25. You got some years on you still,
that's some
but
years, yeah.
this is this is a noteworthy, set of career experiences, and so in depth and such kind of so broad, but also very specific. And a lot of the in the trenches, and a lot of hands on, and a lot of it sounds like very very meaningful work that
Yeah.
you've been doing. Congratulations on that thus far. I'm curious, just one more lap around this, kind of from a 10,000-foot view. What do you see having changed over the last 3 decades of your involvement in education that now makes prominent for you what some of the real needs are that goes along just with the regular education piece of being in school? What are some of the other educational needs or mental health and emotional needs you're seeing emerge that are so important for there to be a consideration around?
I personally have observed a couple of things that stand out to me. Number one, just a lack of individuals that we have entering the education workforce in whatever capacity. And I ask myself all the time, how do we change that? It is a rewarding career. Do you
Yeah, it
get
is.
rich doing it? No, but how do we change it? How do we shift the mindset so that we attract good people? And when I mean good, I mean those who are really interested in working with students.
Yes,
I believe an educator, this is really an old cliche. I do believe it's the most important job in the world. I do.
absolutely.
And and how do we do that? And I ask myself that all the time. How do we attract people to this profession, which can be highly rewarding? There are so many mandates on teachers. Teachers are asked to do so much, but how do we build
Yes.
that capacity, and how do we make the field inviting? The second thing that I notice, and I think about this a lot too, because it really falls into what we do. I noticed this when I first went to work as a teacher, as a gen ed teacher, but I've noticed it increase over the years. Everybody that comes to us in a school, regardless of their skill set or not, has a strength somewhere. Is number one, how do we tap into the strengths of students? But number two, I see, and I talk to educators every single day. School students are coming to school with fewer and fewer skills that we used to just expect. And I call these the learning to learn skills
Hmm.
and school readiness. And that can go into academic skills, but also just those social behavior skills, like how do I get along in the world? So I really believe as educators, from what I've observed, is we're required to teach some of those, many more of those skills, not some, many more of the skills that we always expected students to enter school with.
When you say that, well, why, in what you've seen, and this is, I think, maybe the mental health piece of this and the family piece of this, but why are they entering school now with less of those skills than they did before? What's fundamentally changed outside the educational system such that when they enter, they're deficit in these areas?
In my opinion and from my perspective, and this again sounds a little cliche, is really the family units changed.
Yes, it
Well,
has.
I was an early child raised by grandparents, and that was pretty uncommon in my day and age.
Hmm.
And now it's very common for the non-nuclear family, if you will, to be the ones raising a child. And I don't think that's the problem, but I feel like there's so many stressors that are on the family environment,
Yeah.
regardless if that's nuclear intact or non-intact, is that how is that parent, that guardian, how as a parent, guardian, caregiver, do I provide all the skills? And I believe that families are under so much stress, Graham,
I totally agree.
that
Yeah.
that they don't have the time, and I don't mean that to sound simplistic or trite, that the time simply isn't there. And we've also morphed into such an age of technology
Hmm.
that I believe to so many degrees technology,
Yes.
what's teaching our kids social skills or social norms or behaviors. And I just think that we have a collision, if you will, of all the things that aren't done in direct instruction. And not to just
Yeah.
sound like such an academia, but we have kids coming to us that we have to directly teach those readiness skills. And when I think of readiness skills, I think of holding your pencil, being able to talk to your neighbor, take turns, whatever that may be, before we can ever impart any academic knowledge. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. We'll be right back after word from our sponsor.
Are you preparing for a licensure exam in psychology, social work, marriage and family therapy, counseling, or behavioral analysis? AATBS is here to help. We have been supporting behavioral and mental health students to prepare for their licensure exams for more than 45 years, working with over 1 million students to succeed on test day and move on to the next step in their career. With products ranging from comprehensive courses to quiz banks and delivered live online, self-study online, and in print, AATBS has test prep solutions that meet every student's needs and learning styles. Visit us today at aatbs.com. That's aatbs.com and use promo code BHT15 to save 15% off your next purchase.
I appreciate your candor around that. I think you nailed it. I think families have taken really significant and big hits.
yeah.
If that's the most important institution in our nation or in any nation in the world, if that's the most important institution, the family, and they are being hammered or time constraints or demands or financial things,
Yeah.
you've only got so much, so many pieces of the pie and only so many ways to slice it up. And so some of the kids, sadly, are going to be coming into the schools not having some of the background or some of the, equipping that they need to have to come in getting ready to learn. So, and not to mention some of the interpersonal skills, probably some of the EQ type stuff, social
Yeah.
emotional learning, et cetera, et cetera. So I love your perspective. And on top of that, we've, I think, kind of abdicated some of the teaching of our children to electronics and things to be, allowing for social connections and ways to learn about yourself, sadly. Let's come into
Yeah.
something then. So there's mental health issues, needs, there's academic needs that are out there that you're naming really clearly. Let's talk about your joining eLuma and
Okay.
the role that you find yourself being in. And what are you excited about being with eLuma? And how does it kind of allow kind of this culmination of all you've been doing to now be channeled into a set of services that are pretty unique? Walk us down that.
So I was at a place. I love special education. I'm a little bit of a nerd. Like I love the law, and nobody asked me any special ed legal questions because I go in this big diatribe, and everybody's like, "Brandy, nobody cares about that. Just answer the question." But I was very stagnant. And I told you I'm like the perennial lifelong student learner. That's what's important for me. And I thought, this is becoming rote for me. I don't want anything to become rote and not to make light or mockery or silliness of a situation. But when you've been a nomad, you work a long time. I'm not going to retire anytime soon. And I thought, Brittany, you're going to lose all your skills. Like you
Mm,
are just going through the motions. And I never want to be that person, personally or professionally. So I thought it's just time to start looking. And I don't remember how I came across eLuma. I think on something on LinkedIn or Indeed. And I thought, oh, that sounds interesting, but I don't know if I can do that. I don't know what a product manager is. And I applied and went through a lot of interviews. And eLuma, we're still on so many aspects in a startup phase. Some of us laugh and joke we're the oldest startup. But in part of my interview process, I met with Jeremy Glauser, who's the founder of eLuma. I met with my first supervisor, and he told me, "Brandy, you just have all this education knowledge. I can teach you how to be a product manager." And I've since been to project management school. I've been to agile school, and so now I've kind of geeked out on all these things. But for me,
that's
what
fantastic.
attracted me to apply for the job was the job was just to develop mental health, behavioral health related services and materials.
Uh-huh.
But as I researched eLuma, and I had been using remote virtual speech language services since 2015 when I was in
Mhm.
Roswell. And I really believe in virtual services. I think it's so efficient. And so I was very interested in the special ed aspect of eLuma.
Mm.
But I thought, yeah, I love the thought of developing behavioral health materials and supports. And so that's how I applied. And then when I first came to eLuma, I focused solely on behavioral and mental health, like what we could do,
Yes.
offerings, and really refining what we did and teaching schools how we could build options for their needs. And then after a year, I was promoted to director of product for K-12 mental health, behavioral health services, as well as special ed related services. And so I get to dabble in that too and really refine how we deliver services. And I still get
Yes.
to help with compliance issues and hear needs of schools. So for me, it really is the culmination. I get to be a part and still learn and know what's going
Yeah.
on in the behavioral health world. We do offer some crisis counseling consult. And then, of course, the special ed compliance and how to
Yeah.
deliver services in a remote environment. So for me, it is a culmination.
It
And
is, yeah, it
yeah,
truly is. Yeah, it
yeah,
really is. It's fun to watch and see when all of our earlier years get to come together
yeah.
and not to overuse the word, but to kind of culminate in something that's really a great expression of what we want to be doing next in this next season of our lives. I know that you guys provide teletherapy, school-wide based behavioral health solutions. There's some IEP based related services or school counseling, professional development for a variety of services. I would love our listeners and those that might think about, hey, maybe Luma could be part of our, solution and some of the things that we have needs around. As a product manager, like you're saying, you're supporting and building and the different operations of the products that you're doing. Walk us through some of the things that you guys have in terms of programs for students, for teachers, for professional development. And I'd love for our listeners to understand those things. Tell us.
Oh, absolutely. So let's start with the behavioral mental health side.
Okay.
So we offer, just as you mentioned, Graham, we offer consultation, meaning we can help you build like a tiered support system to look at behavior and social behavior needs. We do that academically in schools very well, but sometimes we don't have a
Hmm.
place for tiered support for the social behavior side. So we offer that. We offer professional development, and what I take a lot of pride in that we've done here at eLuma is we don't just have a canned library of topics for professional development. It would actually be me at this time. I sit down with your school, we talk about your needs, and we work together to craft the topic and then build out the professional development that's individualized, if you will.
Nice.
We do caregiver training in the same way. So a lot of topics on caregiver training, and we will provide that in the evening or what have you. We're currently have done a large series of caregiver training for one of our partners in California. And in fact, just met with them again yesterday to plan out what the spring's going to look like. So we tried to build on the topics. So that's what we do with caregiver training. Going further into the mental and behavioral health side, we offer individual or small group counseling for general education students, as well as that IEP related service counseling.
Mhm.
Um, we offer large group lessons, like guidance lessons, if you will. So we can take your school's SEL, your social behavior curriculum. We can develop the lessons and present those synchronously or asynchronously just to help with staff capacity. In addition to that, we support a universal screener. We're currently partnered with Aperture's DESA. And what we do is we're a reseller of the DESA, but when you purchase a DESA through eLuma, we provide coaching with that. So that means that a consultant, someone like myself or one of our colleagues, would do the data dives for your school, set up what your large group instruction needs to look like, small group and individual, and then help you interpret the data and how we see trends. And it's really a way for us to help schools around building formative assessments for social behavior. We use formative assessments all the time for reading or math, but not necessarily social behavior. So to support that tiered piece and data-driven targeted skills like we were talking about, Graham.
Could I ask just around that real quick with the data you guys are using? Are you doing data review first to then set up some of the programs around what you're finding?
That's a great question. So the DESA is a universal screener, and it's web-based. It for grades K through 5, it's a teacher-driven instrument. For grades 6 through 12, it can be a student self-assessment or teacher-driven. So we do 3 points in the year, just like you guys are used to doing beginning, middle, end of year for academics. We assess those skills. It's all strengths-based. It's not a mental health screener. It really helps build soft skills. I like to talk to schools about you're building workplace readiness skills. You're building post-secondary readiness, those soft skills,
That's
decision
exactly right.
communication. Yeah. And so at any rate, the data really helps us to identify any kinds of risk for lack of resiliency so we can proactively teach those resilience skills. And the DESA helps us to identify targeted skills, and it will provide those skills so we can teach in a
Very good.
scripted manner, if you will, so you don't have to be a licensed counselor, any staff.
Right.
So at any rate, we get the data from the initial assessment that forms the baseline, and
Gotcha.
then we assimilate, dismantle the data as we look at the other recording periods to look at progress or setbacks and therefore.
How are you finding the school districts themselves or the schools you're working with specifically, and even the classrooms? How are you being received by the teachers, administration? What's the response?
In full candor and from my observations over the years, sometimes in schools as school leaders, and I've been in this role as an administrator, to be hesitant to take on a screener that might identify problems we can't support.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that's not what the DESA is. I really start talking to school leaders when I'm involved about, hey, we're building soft skills and we're being preventive as let's think about it. Let's think about behavior. From my perspective, is behavior is an outward expression of maybe lack of social development, right? Like, I don't know how to communicate, so I act out because I become frustrated, whatever that function is. What the DESA does is it helps us to identify, okay, Graham, you're really good at communicating, but you're having a hard time with decision making. So
Yes.
these are ways we can build that skill, and we're directly instructing that skill. I have a friend who uses a DESA a lot. She's a school psych in the Northeast, and says to staff, if a child couldn't read, wouldn't you put them in an intervention group to read? So it's the same thing. If we have children or students who can't make a decision well,
Yes.
or they can't develop friendships, then let's teach them. And the DESA helps us to do that. And so I
That's so
really
helpful.
just talk about it. It's data-driven instruction for social behavior. And it's
Yes.
not about I'm identifying mental health issues that we can address.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. If you can name those needs and target specifically,
Yes.
hone in on where the needs specifically are, man. And you sometimes think, well, is that really our job to do? Should that be happening at home? The fact is, if it's not happening, let's meet the need. It doesn't matter
Right.
where it should be happening or what ought to be happening. If it's not happening, what I'm seeing you guys say is we can come in and we can help with that. In fact, we've targeted it, we've named it, and we know exactly where now to kind of maybe focus our interventions. Who are the staff that you guys have, the personnel that are providing these services? Give us a sense of them.
So we have consultants who have, extensive background in school needs. Some are very well versed in, say, mental behavioral health, some special education. I do a great deal myself of the professional development, which I love. Myself and a colleague that comes in and helps us really helps to support the DESA when we provide that to schools. It just allows us to see what's going on. It's not per se contracted out to individuals that we don't have experience with. So it's somebody with a wide breadth and depth of knowledge around the
Really
social
good.
behavior space.
Yeah, that's great. I know that, teachers also have their own lives and their own interpersonal challenges. And for those teachers that are interested, what kind of services or support do you guys get to provide just to help them better manage some of their own mental health, just personally and just also maybe within the classroom in the school system they're in?
Sure. In the past year, Graham, we have done a lot of professional development that was really about staff burnout.
Uh-huh.
And how do I support myself? And our real message is, as educators, we must learn how to address our own needs, or we're not going to be present for our students. And so we've done a lot of professional development. It's typically a small number of educators, and we really talk about that self-help. How do I address what's going on within me? How do I recognize how to respond to the triggers? And then we work on building out those skills. We don't do adult counseling per se, so we build it in as a training, if you will.
Very good. Very
Yeah.
good. I want to ask you about outcomes in just a minute, but something you said earlier today when we very first started, you talked about this word capacity. What do you mean when you're referring to that?
So capacity, from my perspective and what I've observed, and I'm going to use myself as an example because I wasn't always a counselor. I started out as a math teacher. I was always going to teach elementary, upper elementary, or middle school. I love middle school math. That's what I was going to do, right? And as John Lennon says, life happens while you're making other plans, and that's what happened. When I was a first or second year teacher, if you would have handed me curriculum to teach social behavior, social emotional competencies, I would have freaked out. Like, I don't know how to talk about this, you know. And I think there's a lot of us teachers out there who a child will come and maybe present something to us about abuse or a significant concern or being faced with something very dangerous, and we don't know how to address it. And I know for me, I would start thinking, what do I say? What if I say
Yes.
the wrong thing? I'm going to make this.
Right.
So when I think about capacity, how can we help build staff knowledge, be it a teacher, a paraprofessional, whomever? How can we build an educator's knowledge of behavioral health needs, mental health needs, so that they can support all students? Maybe that's just
Yeah.
talking to in conversation. Maybe that's being able to integrate social emotional learning in the day to day. Sometimes when we integrate in school social emotional learning throughout the day, it's integrated into math, social studies,
Mhm.
language arts, then it's not like, oh, well, we do this once a week. It's what we live at the school and we learn it. Language arts is a great example. I can build writing prompts all day that could address any kind of social emotional need or behavioral need. And if as a teacher, I have some knowledge of how to respond to what may be given to me, and either I can speak to the child or I know who to refer that child to, or I have the
Yes.
staff. So that's how I see capacity in one way. Another
You
way I
bet.
see capacity is maybe we just need an additional counselor or social worker in the building once a week.
Yeah.
So we can do that too. So I really see capacity as twofold: knowledge or personnel, right? It's whatever that school need is.
I think that's really helpful. A lot of time, I always say what happens outside there and then is going to happen in the here and now. We have that in therapy. We have that in our schools. What happens outside the school is going to be happening in school. No matter where you go, there you are kind of idea. They're going to bring those things into the classroom. And I know teachers are already having a full plate in the things that they do. They do so much and so much is asked of them. And then to add one more layer, if you want me to do the social emotional learning things, really, do you want me to take? And the answer is it's going to be in your classroom anyway. And what happens then is that they're going to be presented these things, whether it's maybe some trauma going on in the kid's life, some crisis moment happening, maybe some bullying. And a couple of things happen. If we're not equipped or don't have the services, maybe I avoid talking about these things because like what you just said a moment ago, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I kind of tip them over, what tip the scale such that they start to do the thing I hope they don't, or I don't know how to handle this quite right. So let's just say, it's going to be okay. And let's move on to, our English lesson for today. We avoid it. Or maybe we just get overwhelmed ourselves and not having the time to be able to do it, like you said. So the knowledge and the personnel. So you're saying part of what you guys get to provide also trauma-informed care, crisis response, other types of services that really supplement and complement what the teachers are already working really hard at, but you kind of teamwork with them, it sounds like, to be kind of a nice pairing for what the kids' needs may be.
Right, 100%, Graham, and I really love the way you said supplement. That's what it is. We're supplementing what you're already doing,
Yeah.
just helping you to do it more efficiently.
Yeah.
And
That's
and
so good.
yeah. So, that you said it perfectly. That's exactly what we're doing at eLuma, and our mission is to help all students succeed. And and sometimes to help students succeed, we have to back up
Yeah.
to meet those social needs, those behavioral needs before they can receive any academic instruction.
That's such an important piece. That's almost like Maslow's hierarchy, of needs, food, shelter, and clothing. Self-actualization being at the very top. You can't get to self-actualization unless you got food, shelter, and clothing. So this idea of we can try and say, well, that's not important. We're here to learn. Well, you can you can't learn if they're distracted by some of these lower level base things. If we can just put these into place, manage those, but then they can advance up in the learning piece that they're there to do. So I think it's a really great argument you have around let's meet these needs and then watch the other needs fall into place. Couple quick questions. Um, how many hours of service would you guess you're kind of putting in here? This all teletherapy for the way that you're doing it, and not only that, how many states are you in at this point?
So, of direct student service over 10 years, we have over 34 million minutes of direct
Oh,
student service. We're in
mhm.
approximately 42 states. Sometimes that varies, like if it's a small state and
Yeah,
we lose a customer or we gain. Something that we're very proud of, and we just received this information August through December. We have a 93% customer satisfaction rate at this time. And our provider or our contractor clinician satisfaction rate hovers around 92 or 93%. We just received that back too. And we have extreme
congratulations.
retention rate with our clinicians, which all of you guys listening and in schools, we know that continuity of provider, educator, teacher is huge for our students. So,
That's fantastic. Congratulations. Those are phenomenal stats in 42 states. That is significant.
yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Tell me, as we're kind of winding down for today, where do you, when you think about eLuma and the evolving approaches that are available and the mental health component, and as things continue to evolve, where do you see the future in terms of your guys' support going next?
I really see the future of expanding into more charter schools.
Mm,
I think we see so many students going into charter schools as family needs change
yeah,
and learning styles change. I would really like to see us go into more charters because you can reach students and families in a very comprehensive and collaborative way, almost like a wraparound. Uh,
yes,
I really see us expanding our professional development piece as we continue to grow that, and we have users like yourselves learning that we can customize what we do. You don't just have
yeah,
to choose from a library. So I look forward to that. And I really hope to see us be able to break into, and I feel like that this is our next big thing, really breaking into using those universal screeners to drive
mhm,
a tiered approach to social emotional learning or social
yeah,
behavior. I really want to see us grow into developing soft skills that students need in the post-secondary environment. Over the years, I've just seen the importance of start addressing post-secondary needs from the day a child walks in kindergarten
yeah.
until the day they graduate, and let's build those in a systematic way.
Fantastic. Let me quick question. Would you ever bring this into any homeschooling programs? Would it?
So absolutely, Graham, that's a great question. We are, as we move into our next horizon and to be released, hopefully in the late spring, early
Yeah.
summer, is we will be offering supports to families that they could come directly through eLuma. So that's on our next horizon, but
Good for
coming
you
up very
guys.
soon. We're already in the process of building that, and it'll start in the behavioral health realm and then
Nice.
morph into other areas of need, such as speech and so forth. So that's
Fantastic.
actually in the work for us. So
Good for
homeschoolers
you.
to be
Charter
involved.
schools, good for you
Yeah,
guys.
yeah.
Good for you. Brandy, with all the services you folks provide, I also know that you do a number of webinars just to help people kind of have an ongoing understanding of things emerging and some dynamic things happening. Tell us about some of the webinars you guys do and how often they occur.
So we host monthly webinars. You can sign up at no charge through our website, eLuma.com.
Okay.
And if we don't have an upcoming webinar or you miss one, you can always download the recording. We house those. Some of our most recent recordings, I actually was able to host in a roundtable format with two of my former colleagues from New Mexico around student engagement in hard to engage communities. And it was really a lot of fun. One is a school superintendent, Kevin Summers, and the other is Leisha Hillman, and she's a consultant for the New Mexico Department of Ed now. And I met Leisha during the school shooting in Roswell, and that's how we became friends. So they're doing some really great work. Some other webinars that we have are just how to use universal screeners to inform some of your tiered behavioral support. We also be having webinars around the correlation between mental and behavioral health and academic outcomes. So check us out, and you can look at any of those recordings or you can participate live.
I'll bet that's going to be a dynamic webinar because there are such cool correlations about if we can get the mental health piece in place,
Mhm.
watch what happens to the academic piece. What an exciting thing. Well, Brandy, I so enjoyed being with you today. I would love for our listeners to be able to follow up with you and eLuma after the show. Give us some ways that they can follow up with you.
So a couple of ways: we're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram, and you can get to our website, eLuma.com. And on LinkedIn and Instagram, we're eLuma Therapy. We post quite a bit, and we provide a lot of different blogs, as well as we have free webinars that we publicize. We'd love to have you come. We have a webinar coming up, and I'll be doing that webinar with Cynthia Kofal. She's a former school counselor and does a podcast for school counselors.
Nice.
And would love to have any of you guys come. You can sign up through eLuma.com.
Fantastic. Well, hey, Brandy, thank you so much for today. It's been great to be with you, and congratulations on a wonderful career and what you now get to participate in. It sounds like have a lot of fun with at eLuma. So thanks
Yeah,
for today.
it's great. Thank you so much, Graham. I appreciate you having me here and me getting to share about eLuma. Thank you.
So nice to be with you. Also want to thank you, our listeners, for dropping by and joining Brandy and me today. It's always great to have you with us. Hey, in addition to listening to today's show, would you consider leaving us a review and sharing the podcast with a friend? By spreading the word about our podcast, you help us grow and reach more people, allowing others to discover the valuable insights shared in each of our episodes. Regarding our episode today, I want to remind you that it and its resources and all of our other episodes can be found on our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. Thanks again for being with us on the show, and we'll look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today.
We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.